What up, Headliner Nation? Welcome back into the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle back to talk about our Week 4 tight end start and sit matchups. And last week's accuracy wasn't great. Why is that? Well, because there was only like 5 tight ends to score 10 points last week or more, and that's an awful week for tight end. 60% last week, which is really unfortunate, but we just saw some bad performances from a lot of tight ends across the board. And honestly, it wasn't even really that there were some bad performances. Some of them just didn't have a really high ceiling, so none of them really got to 10 points. We're hopefully going to have better luck at the position this week, though. If you didn't have 5 different guys last week, you probably didn't get very many points out of the tight end position anyway, but we're going to try and bounce back this week. Keep in mind, we're going to talk about the Pittsburgh-Tennessee matchup in just a moment. As of right now, though, it sounds like it's going to be postponed and pushed to Tuesday, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. So let's dive into my start and sits for Week 4. Thursday Night Football, again, could end up being a mess of a game, but Noah Fant is going to be a start for me on Thursday night. Why not? The Jets are giving up over 14 fantasy points per game, and Jonnu Smith's 21 targets are fourth overall at the tight end position this year. So Noah Fant, we're going to go ahead and roll with him. He's been a guy that's been playing very well, and no Courtland Sutton means he's kind of really the 1A, 1B receiver right now for this team. A lot of volume that he's getting. He's going to continue to get more against a bad Jets defense. For Chris Herndon, I'd love to list him as a starter, but basically the same thing as last week, right? He's being used as a blocker more than he is being a receiving threat. And this is why Adam Gase just needs to be fired, because if he was a decent head coach, he would recognize that Chris Herndon might be his best pass catcher right now, and he put him in a spot to succeed and do that. But he hasn't been. He's using him as a blocker for whatever reason, so we're going to have to sit Chris Herndon for right now. The Baltimore and Washington game is also going to include a couple of tight ends that will be starts for me this week. For Mark Andrews, he's a start every single week. If you own Andrews, unless you own Travis Kelce, I'm basically going to be starting him every single week. Unless the matchup is just so tough that you don't believe in it and you have someone that might have higher upside. Yeah, the first week was great. Pretty disappointing the last couple of weeks. He's been troubled with some drops as well, but I'm not giving up on the guy. He's one of the best tight ends in the league. He's basically the number one receiving weapon for Lamar Jackson. And when this offense starts to flow a little bit better, it's been a little all over the place the last couple of weeks. Mark Andrews will go back to being that number one option. So I'm going to keep starting him, especially against Washington, who allows the 6th most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. Logan Thomas is going to be a start for me this week. Going up against Baltimore, they allow over 20 fantasy points per game right now. They allow the 3rd most to opposing tight ends. And Thomas has 24 targets this season, the 2nd best in the league. So yeah, I'm going to keep rolling with Logan Thomas this week. It's a good matchup, and it's a matchup that might require some checking down from Dwayne Haskins this week, getting rid of the ball fairly quickly, and because Baltimore's had some tough times defending the tight end, he could go ahead and have himself at least a touchdown and a pretty high upside of a week. As I alluded to in the beginning, Pittsburgh and Tennessee being postponed this week. They're going to try and get the game in on Tuesday night, it sounds like. Now, I'm going to list Eric Ebron and Jonnu Smith as starts this week, but if you don't want to risk it, go with somebody else. That's going to be the problem with Smith and Ebron this week, is that if you put them in their lineup and the game doesn't end up being played, you end up taking a 0 there. The points are going to count for Week 4, though. Now, double check on your platform. Email customer service, whatever it may be, and double check that. From everything I've seen, it's still going to count towards Week 4, and I don't understand why it wouldn't. There should be contingencies in your platforms to be able to allow for that. But maybe double check and just make sure that that is accurate. Eric Ebron is going to be a start for me this week because Tennessee is allowing the 8th most fantasy points per game, and we still don't know about Deontay Johnson. He's in the concussion protocol right now. If he stays there and he can't get out of it this week, then at that point we think about playing Ebron. Now, if Deontay Johnson gets back, we'll end up evaluating it, and we'll see what happens throughout the course of the week. Right now, Eric Ebron is a start for me. Vance McDonald is a sit. For Jonnu Smith, I mean, he's going to be a start for me. The ceiling might be a little bit lower going up against this Pittsburgh defense. So I don't know if he's necessarily going to be like a top 5 tight end for me. And this might be a good week to actually fade him. Again, probably a little bit lower of a ceiling for me this week going up against this defense. But with that being said, with it being pushed back to Tuesday night, it's a concern that you might not even be able to get any points from him. So if there was ever a week to go ahead and fade him, it would probably be this week. You can go ahead, find yourself a different option. We've talked about guys on the waiver wire video that could help you out. We're talking about guys here on this video. We're going to talk about guys in the rankings video. So we should have you more than covered, that you'll be able to find yourself an option for this week to cover Jonnu Smith. Los Angeles Chargers at Tampa Bay, and Hunter Henry, well, yeah, he's definitely a start for me. Hasn't scored anything yet, but the dude is third in the league in targets. Sign me up for that. Sign me up for volume at the position right now, okay? Even if he's not scoring a lot of touchdowns, give me those targets and give me those catches. Justin Herbert's been looking his way an awful lot. Give me Hunter Henry again here in week 4. And for Tampa Bay, this Tampa Bay offense is going to be a struggle to call every single week for wide receivers and tight end. Because quite honestly, Tom Brady, he could go either way any single week. If one guy's being covered too much and they're trying to game plan him out, he's just going to find somebody else. So this is going to be a tough call every single week. This week, though, I'm going to sit both Gronk and Howard. Gronk had a better game last week. I don't know if I really want to risk it. Okay, the Chargers, a really good defense, could potentially try to take away Gronk this week if they think he's going to be more involved in the passing game. Those linebackers there in LAC, they're pretty athletic. They can keep up with the tight ends. So Howard and Gronk, both of them to me, just a little too risky to put in my lineup this week. Seattle and Miami, and Seattle's dealing with a three-headed monster at tight end. At any point in time, you could see Olsen, Disley, or Hollister on the field. And for that reason, all three of them are sits for me. Now, every single week, one of them could have touchdown upside, but do you really want to risk every single week trying to decide who that's going to be? Now, if they were to have an injury and it just comes down to 2 tight ends, maybe we look at that a little bit more. But for me right now, it really makes no sense to try and fit one of them in your lineup and play this guessing game of who may or may not hit that week. It's already a tough enough position to try and call weekly. For you to try and call one specific team that has 3 guys, it doesn't make sense to waste our time on that. For Miami, Mike Gesicki, he still continues to be a start. Last week, yes, his volume was not there. He basically had the touchdown, and that was it. However, he does have 175 yards this year, which is 5th for tight ends, and his average depth of target is 12.33 yards. So the dude is seeing balls down the field, okay? That came off weird. The guy is seeing some pretty deep passes. He's being used in a deep situation. He's being used at the line. He's being used all over the place. Again, he is a receiver in a tight end position, so keep playing him because the volume and the targets are going to be there on a weekly basis. Minnesota and Houston, and honestly, this is a sit across the board. I don't want any part of any of these tight ends this week. It's too much to deal with. Minnesota hasn't been using their tight ends at all. And for Houston, Jordan Akins is basically that guy that you're going to look at as a start every single week. But Minnesota's pretty tough against tight ends this year. So I'm not going to try and start Jordan Akins this week. So for this game, it's a sit across the board. Pretty quick analysis. Don't even think about it. Nollins in Detroit. And for the Saints, Jared Cook, for the first time this season, is going to be a sit for me. Dealing with a little bit of an injury, so we got to see through this week how he gets done with that. Detroit's been pretty good against tight ends so far this year. And on top of that, his usage is just way down. He hasn't been receiving a whole lot of targets lately. So for me, Jared Cook, he's kind of the guy that's being game scripted out right now. And it's not even really a game script. I'm not sure why New Orleans hasn't really been looking at him. I don't know if it's because they've been targeting Kamara so much. With no Michael Thomas, I would assume that Jared Cook would be seeing some more targets come his way. And it's just not happening. TJ Hawkinson, we're going to go back to listing him as a start this week. New Orleans does give up the most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. Hawkinson has a week that he can definitely come through for us. Now that Kenny Galladay's back, and you have to be keeping an eye on Galladay and Marvin Jones down the field, Hawkinson could see plenty of room over the middle of the field to eat this week against the Saints, and what will likely be a negative game script. I said last week that we were going to walk away from Austin Hooper. And this week, I'm going to jump back on the bandwagon for one more week and see what happens. Dallas doesn't really guard tight ends too well. And if the Browns were smart, and if Kevin Stefanski game plans well, he'll see that. And instead of having Baker Mayfield try to force the ball to his other receivers, Austin Hooper could be a guy that could see some decent volume this week, and if he scores a touchdown, he returns that value for you. Also keep in mind Kareem Hunt's a little bit banged up right now. If Kareem Hunt is limited in any way, that's just a few more targets that could go Hooper's route. So for Austin Hooper, I will use him this week as a start. I don't love it. It's risky. I feel a little bit dirty doing that. But if you have a Jonnu Smith and you're scraping by and Austin Hooper's on your waiver wire, he wouldn't be the worst play this week. Schultz is going to be a sit for me. Schultz is still seeing decent volume, but I'm having trouble getting on board with this guy every single week just because you've got Cooper, you've got Lamb, and you've got Gallup. Both of those guys, all three of those guys at any single point in time can go off. All three of them could go off at the same exact time. Zeke had 12 freaking targets last week. And going up against Cleveland this week, what's going to happen with this game script? I expect Dallas to be able to get out in front of Cleveland, and if that happens, are they just going to run the football with Zeke? It could potentially do that. So that could take Schultz out of the game plan a little bit as well. So Schultz is going to be a sit for me, but I will risk it with Hooper. Jacksonville and Cincinnati, and right now the duo in Jacksonville just isn't doing anything. O'Shaughnessy and Eifert are both splitting a lot of snaps and basically splitting targets. They're combining for about 7 targets a week right now, but neither of them are really turning it into any type of volume. So both of them are far too risky to even take a look at. For Cincinnati, I'm going to go back to Drew Sample again this week as a start. Why? Because he's just on the field an awful lot. He was on the field like 89% of their snaps last week, and we know that Burrow has liked going to his tight end this year. Jacksonville does allow the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, so I'll be all over Sample this week. Another good option to fill in for Jonnu Smith if you're worried about doing that, because again, after Sample's bad week last week, he could have been dropped back to the waiver wire by a lot of teams. Mo Cox, Mo Problems, Indianapolis, their breakout tight end over the last couple of weeks. We're going to put him back in the lineup again for another week going up against Chicago. 8 receptions on 9 targets, 161 yards, and a touchdown over the last 2 weeks. So he's really been stepping in and helping fill a void with a lot of pass catchers going down. And then for the Bears, Jimmy Graham coming off a 2-touchdown performance last week. Believe it or not, it's going to be a sit for me again this week. Indianapolis only allowing 3.07 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. I've also got to see what happens with Nick Foles. Does Nick Foles keep looking Jimmy Graham's way? If it happens again, then yeah, we're going to take a look at starting him moving forward. He was in my waiver wire video. And again, if you're looking for a cheap replacement, somebody to grab to put in over Smith or even Ebron, if you've got a guy that you're worried about this week, you could do a lot worse. But for me, I don't want to really risk it this week. I think we're going to see a whole lot of Allen Robinson, and I think we're going to see the run game with David Montgomery a little bit more this week as well. Arizona and Carolina, I'm just here to remind you of 2 things. Number 1, Ian Thomas is not a thing. And number 2, Dan Arnold truthers, he still isn't a thing as well. We're sitting both of them. How long will Evan Ingram burn me before I start sitting him? Apparently, it's going to be at least another week. But this week, going up against the Rams that allow over 15 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, why not? Let's give it another shot. Jalen Ramsey is going to be on Darius Slayton on the outside. Golden Tate has a pretty decent matchup. We're not going to be looking Damian Ratley's way too often. Evan Ingram is in a prime spot this week. Gerald Everett got back on the field a little bit more last week, and maybe it had something to do with Tyler Higbee's poor performance, but I'll go back to Higbee one more time. Higbee is going to be a start for me again this week, and Gerald Everett, who's seeing some more snaps, but not necessarily seeing more targets, will be a sit. Buffalo and Las Vegas, whether it's Tyler Kroft or Dawson Knox gets back this week. Both of them are going to be sits going up against a Las Vegas defense that allows the 4th fewest fantasy points in the game to opposing tight ends. Kroft had a good week last week. I'm not necessarily going to rely on him to do it again this week if Dawson Knox is out again. For the Raiders, well, we're going to continue to put Darren Waller out there. Yep, Darren Waller had a touchdown taken from him by Morneau last week. That's all right, though. That's okay. No big deal. But for Darren Waller, he's still seeing a ton of volume, is one of the highest target share percentages in the league. And where there's volume, you go towards it. So we'll start Waller one more time. Not a whole lot of tough analysis here either. Ryan Izzo, he's a sit for New England. However, Travis Kelce, you own him, you start him. I don't care if they took away Darren Waller last week from Derek Carr and the Raiders. You don't take Travis Kelce away. You only try to contain him. And even if they do contain him, he's still good enough to be a start, so put him in your lineup. The situation in Philadelphia, even though worse for them, has become a lot easier for us to call every single week because we're going to be missing Dallas Goedert for the foreseeable future, and Zach Ertz will be the play there once again. Zach Ertz jumping way up my rankings right now, and he is a guy that's going to start seeing a ton of volume without having Goddard there. Now, they did sign Hakeem Butler, so you never know. Maybe he'll take away. No, I'm kidding. I do love Hakeem Butler. I'm not really expecting that. So Zach Ertz will definitely be a start. Goddard is out for the foreseeable future. We don't know exactly when he'll be back. We'll continue to monitor it and see if he gets back this season. At tight end, George Kittle should be back this week. He was supposed to be back last week. The only reason he didn't play was really because there was concerns over the turf at MetLife Stadium. They didn't want to risk it with him, but he should be back this week at home in San Francisco. Monday Night Football, Atlanta at Green Bay, and Hurst is going to be a sit for me this week unless Julio Jones is out. If Julio Jones ends up missing this game, Hurst will go back to being a start for me. But Green Bay is only allowing about 8 fantasy points per game over the first 3 weeks of the season to tight ends. And again, when you've got guys like Julio, Ridley, and Gage there taking touches away and taking targets away from Hurst, Hurst is a play that's a little bit up and down for me every single week. Again, if any of those guys misses, even if Russell Gage ends up being out, if he can't get back in time, Hurst will end up being a start for me. Right now, if all 3 of those guys play, though, he is a sit. On the other side, for Green Bay, I'm going to sit all 3 of those guys. A couple of them coming off good weeks last week, scoring a touchdown. However, again, this is basically similar to other situations that we see like in Seattle. There's 3 of them. None of them really stick out. You have good pass catchers out there already in Devontae Adams, if he's back this week, of course, and Allen Lazard. MVS is still out there as well. You use Aaron Jones in the passing game. It's hard to rely on these guys on a weekly basis. So they're going to continue to be sits for me unless someone gets hurt or we start to see a snap percentage increase greatly. For me, though, I'd rather just take the L on being wrong as them as a sit every single week instead of risk listing them as a start and then having that be a game where they do absolutely nothing because the upside and the percentage just is not in your favor. There you have it, headliners. Week 4 tight end start and sit in the books. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button. Also, if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners, hit that subscribe button. Become a part of Headliner Nation today. Now over 104,000 strong. Thanks to everybody out there for subscribing to the channel. And of course, hit me with some questions down below and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. Thanks so much, Headliner Nation, for tuning in to the show. Don't forget to check out all of our rankings later in the week. And I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners. Stay safe, stay healthy, have a good one.